Welcome back. I've got Matt Lenzer on the line. Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How you doing, Mike?
I am really, really good. Really looking forward to this conversation because as we kind of chatted a little bit in the pre-show,
hmm
love what your company's doing. So why don't you share a little bit about you and the company, and then we'll dive into the conversation.
Sure, sure. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of Bizinta. And what Bizinta is a highly integrated back-end system for consulting companies. So we have companies that sell widgets and manufacture things, but there's a whole other side of a different kind of company that's out there that basically sells people's time. So what that sort of involves is, you need to know who you have, and then because you have people, they all have different skill sets and everything. So you can track their skills. You need to know what their schedule is when they're available. We need to collect their time. We need to get it billed, and then we need to be able to report on all of that. So what Bazinta is this system, sort of like a all-in-one system that handles that whole thing. So everything, like service delivery for a consulting company or any kind of service professional services company, we handle. And so there's all sorts of details that we can get into, but that's kind of the overview. About me personally, I was the original author of the system. So I worked in industry in a company in the Silicon Valley that was a finance and accounting consulting company, and there wasn't a system that existed to do this, and so it was built in-house. And then people kept asking, how are you getting able to get these reports so quickly, or how are you running your company so efficiently? And so that those questions sort of led to the company being spun off as an independent company. So that was in 2017.
Well, congratulations on
Yeah,
that.
thank
It's
you.
like
Thank you.
if you can't find it, build it, and
Exactly.
that's what you did, and then all of a sudden you build it and it works, and everybody goes, "Hey, we want it," and you're like, "Well, that wasn't the intent. Was to
Right. Right.
market something that we built, but a nice accidental discovery for sure." And I think again, we talked about this a little bit in the pre-show,
hmm
where in the things you just mentioned. And the first thing that came to my mind, and I don't know why I thought about this, but it was almost as if, this system is more like a Rain Man type of situation where they know where every piece, all the interchangeable parts are working at any single moment in time. Where from a human standpoint, that's next to impossible to be able to have that, where you have a system in place where okay, client calls, we need this and we need it by X time.
Right.
Okay, you go in, normally that's calling a bunch of managers. What's your capacity? Who do you have
Right. Right. Who's
available? Who
available?
who
Exactly.
who's on this project? Can you pull them off? And you're doing all these things where your system will go, you put in the input and say, "Hey, what can we do?" And it'll say, "Here's who you can have on the team. Here's who's available. This is what they do. This is their expertise. This is what you need." Boom, spits it out, and all of a sudden, okay, here's our team
Right.
mates that are going to be working on this. Okay, let's roll it out. The client will be blown away. And they're going, wait a minute, how in the world are you able to put that together so quickly? Or these people just sitting around? No, it's just we know that
Right.
these people are available. They're in between projects, or they're coming off a project at the end of this week, so they're going to be available next week. And
Exactly. That's exactly it.
yeah. So that's amazing that that exists because organizations struggle with that every single day. And for me, one of the biggest things, and the second time I've said this today, I was on a podcast earlier today and I talked
Mhm.
about this. It's like if you can cut through the silos and implement systems that automatically can help you with this, so you can focus on the things that we as humans thrive at, and the creativity and the doing the work and being
Exactly.
creative and all of that, you have such a huge advantage over other companies because all of that quote unquote back office stuff, but this is not just back office. This is not, oh, upload your receipts and we'll generate your
Mhm.
expense report for you. There's so much more to this. And that's what really impressed me about, your organization when I was looking into it, and definitely wanted to have you on the show because I want my audience to realize that implementing something like this can really change things for your company. And, obviously birthed out of Silicon Valley, pretty much everything we're using today, it has its
Yes,
birthplace out
absolutely.
of that region. It's like the incubator of creativity. And a lot of people think, oh, it's just tech. It's like, no, it's the incubator of what we use in life. You start, you name anything, it's like, okay, this was that. It came from there, it was born from there. And of course,
Yeah.
and
It is
this,
kind of
go ahead.
Yeah, it is kind of a crazy environment and sort of this pot boiler of all of these people crammed together. It's sort of a crazy place to live and be involved in. I mean, I live down the street from Facebook, all these, all of these different companies and all of this cross-fertilization. But yeah, I think that being at my previous job and seeing how companies were running and seeing the internal struggles that we were having to supply people and stuff was yeah, it was a good, and I had the technical skills to take that and build a system out of it. I don't do any programming anymore, but I was the original builder. So
And I think
um
that
yeah.
helps a lot, especially with your team as you're
Mhm.
building out new features and items, is you can talk the talk. Even there might be a new tool or a new design platform or a new programming language or something that comes out. What I know in my limited exposure to it
Mm.
is there's a foundational organization to things and you can pick up on it in no time at all. So when you have that as a background, but then you're also, the chief executive and you're overseeing everything,
Yes.
that that helps you connect with your people more, especially when you're giving them direction, because your direction is based on, I'm going to ask you to do this. You're
Mhm.
probably using your own system, so it kind of helps you out too. Or
Yep.
as like we used to say, because I worked for a software company, think the phrase was "eat your own dog food," which is basically
Yes. Mhm.
we're going to use this program internally, so we can find the bugs. We never find them all. Our customers are usually good at that. They're usually really good. Remind me to tell you the bike bell story in a moment. I
Okay.
like sharing that one. It's funny.
Yeah.
Um, but what happens is because you have that expertise and knowledge, when you do delegate something or ask a team or group or division to create something, you know what their capacity is, you know what you're asking for, you have a good idea what it's going to take for them to be able to build it. And
Yeah.
having that as a leader is, again, crucial. And not every executive has that, nor should we expect to, because a lot of times
Yeah.
you just don't have that. You could be Alan Mulally, who ran Boeing and then he left and he went to Ford. Okay, airplanes, cars,
Right.
a little different, but uh, the premise is the same. How do you get the best out of your people and create an environment where
Yep.
people can
I
thrive?
I do I do feel like we do have that advantage that you're talking about in our ability to add new features. So that's one thing that I noticed from other companies that are like us is a lot of them they've sort of gotten to a certain point and they become very static, I guess, where they're not innovating anymore. And so that is, I feel like maybe a superpower that I have of being able to work really closely with my customers and with the engineering team and be able to turn these new features out. So we're like doing like two major features a year, which is a lot, and we can crank really fast. And so I feel like we caught up with everybody a while ago, and now we're starting to just sort of what I say gap. That's what I tell everybody. We're starting to gap away from the other companies that we're competing with. So just with adding features, I have a list of over 400 feature requests from our customers. So the framework, I feel like that's a good thing. The framework is very fertile, I guess, where people just keep thinking of like, oh, but if it did this, if it did this, if it could just do this other thing, I can see where these things would be connected and would just make my life easier. And so just constantly getting requests and suggestions of ways to just make it even better. So
That's great.
yeah,
And if you're rolling out two major updates a year,
yeah.
to simplify things, if you got 400 in the pile, that means you're going to be around for 200 years. So
Oh
that's
no,
great.
yeah, that those 400 aren't 400 like major features, they're
No,
all the
they'll
details.
yeah they'll group
They'll
into,
group up, yeah. But
but
just yeah, just all of these things. Do you mind if I circle back a little bit to something
of
you
course,
mentioned?
of
Yeah,
course.
because we were talking about you were saying, hey, this power of being able to you know, know what's going on in your company is really is super powerful. And I wanted to kind of make a distinction because the story of these professional services or consulting companies is sort of interesting, and that they're very different from a product company. I mean, Bazenta is a product company, but you can just say I want to be a consultant and then hang up a shingle and you can start your business. You could start your business in a week, right? And so they're different. A product company, you have to have a product first, which is you have to climb this hill. And then after you have the product, then it's easier to scale. But the consulting business is hard to start and then very difficult to scale. So you get going. And what we're really trying to do is like when you have 10 people, the owner can like keep track of everything. They know everybody, they know what everybody can do, what they're doing and everything. It's all in their brain. They get to about 40 and then now they can't keep track of that anymore. And so we want to take that small company, like boutique consulting company, and be able to expand that owner's brain basically so that they can continue to sort of give the same service level and responsiveness to their customers at a much larger company, that's 100, 200, 300 people. So that's really kind of where it's going. And that's in a larger, at a sort of a high level, we're sort of taking that just taking that ease and everything and being able to know what's going on and then using a system now to provide like that memory and everything and that knowledge.
It's crucial, and
Yeah.
it helps organizations grow and continue to grow and expand. And this is a stat that I discovered a little
Hmm.
while ago, and it's alarming, but then again, not surprising. And I'm guessing you'll find it shocking, but then you'll go, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
It's a stat that 52% of the Fortune 500 companies from the year 2000. We also remember that was kind of the dot-com
Yeah, that
bomb
was a
area.
dot-com bomb. Yeah.
Yeah, boom. But 52% of the Fortune 500 companies in the year 2000 are either gone or were acquired.
Hmm.
So you take the top 500 most profitable, largest companies on the planet, and half of them are gone in
Yeah.
quarter century, which it tells me that in a lot of those cases, and you look at the companies, and if you know anything about them, you go, okay, this is where they misstepped, this is what they did, this is how they did this, or well, it just was a bad timing thing. Like, for example, there's a pharmaceutical company in San
Hmm.
Diego that was, just was birthed during the pandemic, was worth, I think, $4 billion. When they
Wow.
filed bankruptcy last month, they're gone. It's
Yes.
like, how do you go from a multi-billion-dollar organization to gone? And there's reasons why,
Hmm.
but again, you said, a lot of those organizations, there's like, okay, we quote unquote made it.
Right.
And that's when you might as well start writing the obituary, because that they're dead, or they just haven't died yet. Because if you don't grow, you're not gonna continue
Right.
going anywhere.
Yes.
So, speaks volumes to the companies that you're working with and your own, of course, because what happens is when you build companies and you have somebody like that hits that 40 number you mentioned, all of a
Yes.
sudden
That's a
that
turning point. Yeah.
that's where it's either gonna stagnate and sink or go away, or just kind of hum along sort of, and just that's where it
Hmm.
is and doesn't really make much impact. But the ones that go from there to the bump up to the next level, that's when you start seeing a lot of impact by organizations and what they do in their communities, and just everything. Doesn't matter what they make. It's just when you have a company that goes from that to that, that's a huge impact for society, and that's what we want
It
to
is. It is.
reward.
Yeah.
And how do you do it? Well, obviously, having the ideas and the concepts and the products that you offer helps them do that. And
Yes.
because otherwise, the reporting is going to be the best of whatever your Excel guy or woman's going to be doing
Yeah.
and flushing
I want
out.
to I want to talk about reporting a little bit for sure because
Yeah.
that's probably the main benefit. So we have a whole efficiency thing of just having these processes really efficient, but what sort of elevates everything and sort of gets to that like extra brain power for the owner is the reporting. And one of the really cool things that we can do is, um, as you said, like there's usually a spreadsheet somewhere that someone's updating. And so that there's so many problems with that because if it takes that person a week to put that report together, now the report's a week old and they may have spent hours and hours doing it. And so now there's a person with their job and most of the time they're just making reports. And then they may be spending a lot of time trying to tie like multiple systems together. Like, okay, it's the client is called this in our scheduling system. It has a different name in our timekeeping system, and then also in the third name in our billing system. But with Bazinta having it was it was built from the ground up with the integration in mind because I had the advantage of having worked in industry and knowing where I wanted to end up at. So there's only underneath. It's not like some companies they keep bolting things on and a lot of times that's clunky, right? So what we started with one database. So let me give you an example of a report that you can do. You can take your schedule. So you planned out everything for the next 6 months about where people were going to work and how many hours they were going to work. You can easily, with one click, say, I want to see the time that was actually recorded versus the schedule that we had. And now you can see how you performed versus your schedule, which is super important, but I don't know of any other system that could give you that, of like, how to, I can pull these two sort of disparate databases together, but in Bazinta, they're all together, so this project is the same project because it literally is in the database. And so just something like that to just say, hey, how are we performing? Are we estimating our scheduling appropriately? Or are we consistently going over month after month, so that we need to like tune up our planning because we keep ending up shorthanded because we think that somebody's going to take 100 hours and it takes 200, stuff like that. So super useful.
Well, not only that, I just, thought of an idea of,
Uh-huh.
when you have the actual time needed versus what you schedule, it
Hmm.
ties into, properly staffing, especially if you have some type of customer work or organization where there's, a lot of fluctuations with demand. You
Hmm.
think like restaurants or grocery stores or things like that, where you can say, okay, this is where we're seeing it. And you see it a little bit in place here and there, but it's still convoluted. It's not as clear where you say, okay, we know that historically, other than anomalies, that we need more people Thursday nights from 4 to 6 p.m.
Right,
All
right.
right. Well, then you design it that way. Then guess what? You're always properly staffed to serve the client or customer. And what happens is the customer has a good experience, which means they tell their friends, it's like, oh, I love going to this restaurant on Thursdays before, 5 o'clock because it's the early dine special or something.
Hmm.
Well, guess what happens? They start telling all their friends start coming along. Next thing you know, you start seeing the
Absolutely.
spike
Yeah.
unless you just observe it and going, wow, it's getting busier, you're going to see that in the reports. You can get ahead of it. It's like, wow, we're starting to see a
Yep.
10% increase week after week on this. We're probably going to need to allocate more resources. So what happens is you do that. So you're not overwhelming your people because they're
Correct.
just,
Yes.
running too many tables, for example, just as a restaurant example. And and again, the customer experience continues to grow because yeah, they're busy, but they were able to take care of us and we still
Exactly.
had a great meal. So that won't happen unless you've got somebody that's specifically focused to watch that. And even then, they have to pull from a bunch of different systems and the margins are so
Exactly.
low in restaurant
Oh yeah, for
that
restaurants for sure.
they can't have anybody like that. They'd lose money. So again, that's just one example off the top of my head where this really shines. And again, I think about it, and especially the work that I've done in my career and the people that I talk with and organizations,
Hmm.
it's just one of those things where I look at this and I'm like, this is such an amazing thing to help with efficiencies and just not just in scheduling, but all the other things that it does too. The reporting side of things alone is a game changer because when I see a report or I see
Hmm.
some type of output, I'm looking at something. For me, maybe I'm the oddball, maybe I'm not. I look at it and I go, okay, what does this report tell me? But what opportunities do I see that could take the organization to the next
Absolutely.
level based
Right.
on this? you're not going to get that from an Excel spreadsheet per se, unless you're really driving in and you're playing with the
Yeah.
pivot tables and
Yeah.
all the other boring fun stuff that everybody
Well,
that
we
loves to
have
sell.
so this we have it's sort of a joke. We call the our reporting tool the MOAR. So we have several reporting systems, but like the big one. So MOAR stands for Mother of All Reports. And so this is this tool where you can grab I mean, you have this giant menu of basically everything and all the different sort of modules that you're using, and you just can build a report, and I know that, and then you can set up a report maybe that's custom to you, because one of my experiences is all of these consulting companies are all run a little differently. They all sort of have a different thesis of like, some of them are like all about work-life balance, and some of them are like, yeah, we're not going to have any employees. We're only going to have a management team and all contractors. Like there's all these different things. And so we're going to do mostly fixed fee billing, or we're going to do mostly time and materials. And so we don't know what reports they're going to need. This might be familiar to some of the listeners. You get into some of these systems and there'll be a menu of 200 reports. And you're like, I don't even know what to do with all of this, right? Like, and how are these reports different? And then like, you'll still find out that like one's close, another one's close in a different way, but you can't get exactly what you need. So this reporting tool where you can, basically build the report however you want and save it into Bizinta as a report for your own company is that's one of the huge, I think when we do that in a demo and show people if they can do that, that kind of knocks their socks off. And then they're like, wow, I can suddenly think of all of these cool things that I could start reporting on. Like, they'll have a list of 5 things that they wish they could find out, and they can't. So
You
yeah.
brought you brought back Crystal Report nightmares. Thanks.
Exactly.
Appreciate that.
I
Yeah,
remember all
it's like,
that.
yeah,
I've been around, I think we've both been around a long time. I remember
yeah.
that, but I remember that it took like an engineer or an IT person to write it. And so,
Yeah, and then of course there'd be versionitis with it. So you'd grab
yeah,
the report, run it, and it would pull from the wrong field. And then of course the boss's boss presents it, and then there's always that one that'll
right.
say, "Wait a minute, that formula doesn't look right," and they're right, it wasn't. And then next thing you know, it takes you a week to sit back down because your boss
Exactly.
and your boss's boss and your boss's
Yep.
boss's
Yep.
boss chew into you, and it's like. Yeah, I'm just gonna, can I get a standing desk? Because I'm not gonna be able to sit down for about a month here. So,
Exactly.
yeah, no, but again, I love the fact that you have this reporting thing where it's like, well, what are you looking for? And
Yeah,
you
exactly.
build it, and you can just do it instead of using IT or Crystal Reports or
Exactly. Yeah. Not
and
having, yeah. And the companies that we deal with don't have an IT department. They might have an MSP with that they're working with. So if the owner or maybe the ops manager, whatever, if they can't do it themselves, then it's not going to happen. They don't have those resources. So we really want to give them all of the tools that they can have. And then, yeah, and you can kind of decide among the management team, like what are, everyone talks about KPIs now. So it's really like what 5 reports that are going to have our KPIs on it that the whole company is going to use. You make that in the MOAR tool, and then just share that to the whole management team within the Bizinta system. And maybe I'll just throw this in there also. It's like it's real time. So, there isn't like some sort of, it's not a separate system where we have to pull the data out and like, and then we run the report on that. So if someone, maybe adds time to their timesheet, you look at the report at 12, someone adds a bunch of time, or they finish their timesheet, you look again later in the afternoon, it's going to reflect that if you want to. You may not want to, but you could like watch things the day develop as it's going if you wanted to, because you could say it's all going back to that same single database that's pulling each change. So every change is immediately visible to you. So
and
yeah,
having
really
real
cool.
time,
Real
yeah,
time. Yeah.
having real time information and being able to look at that, make your decisions and analyze to the point where you're making smarter decisions. And if you make smarter decisions, in all likelihood your company is going to be successful. So Matt, I've loved this conversation. Where can
Yeah.
people find out more about you and all this
Mhm.
amazing work you're doing?
Just what You mean like what are our plans going forward
Yeah,
or?
the plans going forward, and then, where can people find out more about the company?
Oh, okay. Yeah, for sure. So we're at www.bizinta.com. So that's Bizinta. People always ask me about the name. It's sort of supposed to be like business integration. That's kind of the vibe that we're going for. You know, we just keep adding more and more features. So one of our recent things is an auto pay. This is fairly recent that we added. So we partnered with a payment processor. So you can generate the invoice. Now you can send the invoice to your customer, and it can just automatically charge it. You know, you could say we're going to give you a 7-day grace period. If you don't say, there's something wrong with this invoice, then we're just going to go ahead and process it, and we can use ACH or credit card. So there's another thing that we've sort of had. It took a little while to get going for people to sort of get comfortable with it, but we've had a stampede lately, and we just onboarded 5 new companies to use this system because they just see how much time it's going to save. Because like collections, that's just another, there's 100 things that I could say that Bizinta does that are just like things that are just annoying and waste time in your company. And that's just another example of something that's fairly new. I don't want to make any vaporware promises, but I do have an engineer already working on this. I think the final piece is to add a tasking system, sort of similar to a Monday.com. We're not trying to remake Monday, obviously, but as far as just, you know, we have the project, you have the timesheet, maybe you want to have like a checklist, like every month, the controller who's working at this company needs to do these 12 things. And so then you can check it off. They can say when they did it. And then whoever's managing that project can just quickly see that everything's been done and the customer is being served. And so we should have that out by the end of this year. So then we already have a bunch of companies that are waiting and are just waiting in the wings to like sign up as soon as they see that, because that's like the one thing that they want to integrate with everything else. And it saves you money. We do charge for all these modules, but to get everything separately, 2 to 3 times more expensive than what Bizinta would be. So yeah, we're just keeping at it. We're still, like, as I mentioned earlier, we're still in that phase of just like adding and adding more and more cool features, as opposed to just saying, here's our system, sort of setting back and like collecting the subscriptions, which I think it's kind of a bummer if a company is doing that, but I see
Yes.
it a lot.
Yeah, I do too. And I'll definitely have the information in the show notes. And that,
Yeah.
the task thing is definitely, an additional feature that is,
Yep.
a game changer, especially with it, the integration of things. Because everybody,
Yes.
and I worked for a couple software companies, and
Very
I'll
good.
tell, I'll tell the bike bell story in a second.
Okay.
But the, I've had, the situation where everybody wants, I wish we had one system that did everything.
They
And
always they say that.
they say that.
It's very difficult. I
It's
can
very
tell you
di-
it's very difficult to
it's
actually pull
very
it off. Yeah.
it's very difficult, and sometimes it doesn't make sense because depending on that company, if they don't have an understanding of stuff, it's like, okay, we have a company that makes cars, okay, and they built cars for decades, and all of a sudden now we're going to get involved in banking and satellite
Yeah.
dishes and all
Yeah.
these other things, and not that that's ever happened before General Motors, but it's like, who are you? What are you doing? But having said that, when you see things that integrate well together, if they just have the right connecting pieces, it makes a big difference. So the bike bell story. So I worked for a
Okay.
software company
Hmm.
years ago, and we brought in a guy named Vinny, and we were out just outside of Detroit, and Vinny was from the Bronx.
Hmm.
So that brought the Bronx attitude, and
Right. Right.
the background and all of that good stuff, which was a breath of fresh air for a Midwestern company.
Okay.
And he was brought in for QA, and so basically he would test the code, and anytime there was an error, the classic window error message would go
Right.
off and be like "Brr," or something like that. And the developers were there, it was a small office, they would hear it, they would get frustrated because they were mad. They hated errors, but they were writing code that was riddled with it. So, it was kind of I told them, I said, you got to quit hating so much on it because you're hating yourself and you don't want to do that. So,
Right.
long story short, as they were going into a major revision, there was a ton of errors in it. So, that alarm was going off all the time. So Vinny said, you know what? I'm getting tired of hearing it too. So I'm going to change it to something different. So he changed the error code alarm in
Mhm.
Windows to a bike bell. So go ding, 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 ding.
Uh-huh.
So now all of a sudden, every time there was an error, there was a bike bell, ding, ding. The developers were still mad about it, but the rest of us in the office were all laughing hysterical because it was silly and playful. And it
Right.
changed the tone of the company. And so anytime I think about that, I remember that fondly because it was entertaining to be a part of it. Wasn't
Yeah.
entertaining to have to clean up all that code, but at the end of the day, it made the product better and they end up getting acquired and it worked out well for everybody. But it's all about just, doing
Culture
your,
like that is like super important. That really
yeah,
kind of makes or breaks the company. Yeah. So,
yeah, yeah. So
yeah.
love this conversation, Matt.
Okay,
Like I
great.
said, we'll get all that information in the show notes and really appreciate you and the great work you're
Okay.
doing over there.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great talking to you. Obviously, talking about Bazinta is my favorite subject, so I appreciate the opportunity to do that. So, thank you so much.